Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's cyber panel. We hope this small bites format is something you enjoy. Please don't forget to provide feedback in the post-event survey. We've been very excited about this year and our expanded coverage of events, including in-person, virtual, fireside panels, as well as product and market workshops. I'm going to share with you a quick overview of the BBA. We have 3 pillars to our mission: education, advocacy, and expanding the unique ecosystem of Boston across New England, the US, and globally. By further building our ecosystem, we are expanding our community, which is our most important goal. For example, the BBA published the Massachusetts Legislator Report on blockchain technology to better inform our community on our website. We would like to thank our sponsors who this could not be done without: Algorand, Deloitte, Ropes and Gray, Fidelity Center for Applied Technologies, Media Shower, Copper, Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, Arrival Bank, Ripple, Aon, Nietzsche, File, Providence, Topusware, True Ticket, and DVLP Medical. There are many ways to get involved in the BBA as a member, volunteer, or a corporate member. We would be thrilled to share more about it. Please reach out and consider joining our organization. If you've not already subscribed to our newsletter, it's a great way to stay plugged in to the blockchain community news, events, and other areas around the Boston area. You can subscribe by visiting our website, bostonblockchainassociation.com, scroll to the bottom and hit the subscribe box. And tonight's upcoming events, we have a panel on custody starting on November 12th, the University Blockchain Competition, November 23rd and 24th, the TAB event, December 3rd, and the BBA social event at Fidelity Investments on December 5th. On to tonight's main event. Tonight, we actually invite 3 speakers: Tammy Khan, co-founder and CEO of FIO; Courtney Moj, Senior Vice President, Corporate Practice Leader at NFP, and our moderator tonight will be Karen Knox, our BBA board member. And I hand it off to you, Karen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Craig. I'm delighted to have Tammy and Courtney with us this evening. Since working in the digital asset space, I have felt that supporting those businesses has been so difficult, and finding the right partners has been difficult. And certainly for technology, cybersecurity is a monumental concern. And sometimes that can seem quite arduous and very difficult for companies to know where to begin. How do they approach it? They're in tech. Or perhaps they know tech so well, cybersecurity really shouldn't be a concern. And so tonight, I just want to talk a little bit with Tammy and Courtney about how they see partnering with companies that are either in blockchain and emerging tech, or they're touching blockchain, emerging tech, AI, et cetera, and how you partner with those companies effectively and really break down what is cybersecurity and how can we approach it. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Tammy and Courtney introduce themselves, and can't wait to dig in.
Sure. You want me to go first, Tammy, and then I'll hand it over to you? All right. This is I like this question because I love talking about myself. It's the easiest question. So I'm happy to raise my hand first. So very nice to virtually meet everybody here. Thank you for coming. My name is Courtney Moj. I lead our cyber liability practice at NFP. A little bit about me. I actually physically sit in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been on the insurance side of the house for a little over 10 years now. Prior to that, I was a practicing attorney focused on data privacy law. And then for a quick cup of coffee, I got my fill of information technology at a company called MailChimp, which was founded here in Atlanta, now owned by Intuit. So really seen cyber risk from, a lot of different sides of the house. And, we bring that background to our clients. Everything you're going to hear me talk about comes from a cyber insurance perspective. But I think at the end of the day, when you hear myself talk, when you hear Tammy talk, what you'll really find is that cyber insurance is so integrated into cybersecurity and cybersecurity hygiene, it tends to start to mirror itself. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tammy.
Hi, and I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm fading in and out of existence here. It was working before, but I'm in a quantum state. I'm both here and not here now. I'm Tammy. I am the co-founder of FIO. Actually, our company acronym stands for Your Eyes Only. So we are a security company. And I'm excited to come here and talk about real world risks as it relates to cybersecurity, but also how we as individuals are also part of companies. A passion project that FIO has been building for the past 2.5 years that we released 2 weeks ago in open beta is called CryptPass. That's with a K, K-R-Y-P-T, Pass. And essentially we've taken all the data that we've had for our clients for all these years and everyone, 29 billion leak credentials, and we're giving it out for people to see what we have on them and then use a decentralized solution to fix it. And so background is in the security space for over 6 years now. I think we've done about 300 audits. And by audits, we mean like going in and looking at the code and seeing how to steal everything. But that could be very doom and gloom. And so the flip side, I've really been enjoying kind of getting out and educating and giving people real tooling to help not just themselves, but their clients. So I'm excited.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So you started off, you mentioned education. And so I think the best way to start in figuring out how do we manage cybersecurity in the digital asset space is, what does cybersecurity look like? What are we talking about when we say cybersecurity? I think it's easy for us to use terms all the time, especially those who are in the space and know the space well, to assume everybody's on the same page. And depending on everyone's specialty at a company, it's not always obvious to everyone. So could we just start off and have a breakdown of what's cybersecurity? We know it hasn't been around for decades, really. So tell me what that looks like for each of you. And Tammy, if you want to start.
Sure. I mean, cybersecurity is basically, shoring up that all of your technical processes don't have ways for people to get in. I mean, at its most fundamental level. I like to think of cybersecurity a little more broadly. It's not just code. It's not just practices. It's also individuals and the threats that we don't know, right? So I think real cybersecurity is taking a long, hard look at the entire organization and every piece of it, and then figuring out how to make the cyber parts, the technical parts more secure. But it's still people.
Yeah, and I can kind of take it a little bit from the opposite lens from a insurance breakdown, right? I think the easiest way to do that is kind of define what a cyber insurance policy does, and then what cybersecurity means for us, just based on what that policy does. So at a fundamental level, a cybersecurity policy is there to protect the financial loss that a company incurs due to a covered cyber event happening. The way that we define a cyber event is generally one of two things. One, it is any compromise or a breach to data. So that can not necessarily have to do with the internet or digital. That could simply be, I left my laptop with a lot of good passwords on it at Starbucks and I walked away and someone stole it, right? I printed the wrong thing on the outside of an envelope, and that was personally identifiable. That could be a compromise to data. The second way a cyber event is triggered is a compromise or a breach to a company network, right? And that is what we tend to see in the news. That is what we tend to be a little bit more concerned about when it comes to emerging risk. So, from our perspective, when we're talking about cybersecurity, it really is all right, if this is what a cyber policy is covering, has our insured thought about how to prevent that cyber event from happening? How to mitigate that cyber event in the event that it does happen? And do they have an understanding of how that could happen for their company? And that is what cybersecurity means for us. And so that's really where the majority of the questions come from when we ask on an application. I'll talk more about whether or not an application is still the best way to ask those questions, but that's where we're coming from a cybersecurity perspective.
Perfect. And when you were, let's say 2, 3, you could say more years, but I think we've had incredible change over the last 3 years and how cybersecurity is addressing blockchain and emerging tech. And so if you want to talk a little bit about what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can kind of talk about it from more of the insurance perspective of kind of like what's going on and how we are getting a lot more creative, right? To address it and to understand it. And keep in mind, right, in the insurance world, and I will fall on the sword and say that we tend to be a little bit slower, right, than our counterparts. And that's because we live in the world of underwriting. And in order to underwrite, what do you need to underwrite? You need data. And until things happen, you can't really collect that data. So we tend to be a little bit slower. But that said, right, kind of how we're kind of keeping up and how we're understanding it. Cyber insurance has really become more of what I like to call dynamic insurance versus static insurance. And what's the difference, right? I can analogize that a little bit more to a directors and officers policy, or maybe even your homeowners. What I mean by that is you get that insurance, you go through an application process, you put that insurance on the shelf, and you hope you never have to see it again until you have a claim, and then you utilize it, right? Dynamic insurance, right, is when you're partnering a little bit more with your insurer to really have a fundamental understanding of what it is that you do, how you're better protecting yourself, and you're even relying a lot of time on that insurer to help you in the development of your cybersecurity hygiene. So some of those things are our insurers are, giving more tools and access to our clients, such as endpoint detection and response systems, managed detection and response systems, saying, hey, if you utilize these tools, we can give you discounts, things of that nature. And what does that fundamentally do? It allows us to better track our clients. It allows us to get better data and keep up with that emerging technology and what's going on behind the scenes. Another thing just in general is just kind of integrating the two worlds. So one thing you will see more, particularly on my end, right? More individuals getting into the cyber insurance space who probably could not spell insurance before they got involved, right? And we're seeing a lot more marrying of people who are just full blown into technology, kind of those white hat hackers, really sitting side by side with our underwriters to kind of understand that emerging technology and come up with those tools to better help our clients.
Yeah, I think to that point, Courtney, it's about the partnership with the client. And as you said, it's dynamic. So in order to address the evolving tech, underwriters, anyone who's partnering with these types of companies has to take a dynamic approach with the services they're providing and understanding it is ongoing. It's not something like, I'll talk to you once a year. You confirm all of our services are great. You're going to pay your fee. Fantastic. And then we move on and we'll see you next year and take you out to dinner. It really is something that requires that ongoing conversation and ongoing understanding of how our customers' business is evolving and what they're doing to address the tech is they're innovating their technology, right? So they can be more competitive and, understanding their sales pitch and figuring out like, okay, now what does that mean for the cybersecurity? Yeah. Tammy?
Spot on, yeah.
Yeah, no, I like, Courtney, what you said about the integrated approach. And we are seeing, more, how do I put this nicely? So most of my life in this has been in the very like early stage Web3. So we're talking about like protocols that are just launching. Like, funny anecdote, our CTO did the first ever threat model workshop for Solana before they went on mainnet, right? And got into a big fight with Anatoly, the head there, over what's considered an acceptable threat. And not losing the money was definitely a threat that's acceptable, but downtime because of the way that the network might function, and then outages was considered an acceptable threat, right? So and anyone who has followed Solana has seen that over the years there's been some significant outages, and this was a threat that was accepted, and then that's fine. That's part of going through kind of the modeling exercise. But what I like is hearing that the white hat hackers are sitting side by side and bringing some of this stuff up, because I do think that it's just new, and a lot of the threats are the same, but there's still some threats that are different. And so I think blending that and being aware that you probably need some kind of an expert who's been there. We joke that companies will come to us and say, "Oh, can you audit?" Because we audit the code, and they'll say, "Well, can you audit this language? Can you audit this language?" And we can, because our my team is brilliant, and of course they can. But then what we kind of say is like, it's not about the language; it's about the logic, and the logic is the same whether it's in Rust or it's in Solidity or whatever. Like that, these are logical things, and the threats are the same whether it's an up and coming new blockchain, whether it's a tried and true, building something on something, but the threats are still all there. So it's really about mapping that to the organization. And I did kill my background because it was making me dizzy to go in and out. And it is raining, so if it gets too loud, tell me. I work in my sunroom, and I feel like I have a tin roof, but if you guys are okay, then I'll stay here.
I think it's okay. Thank you. I think so. The idea that we have folks coming together from different angles to address cybersecurity, especially for emerging tech, is really powerful. One, it demonstrates that there's longevity to emerging tech, which really seems obvious, right? Like, we've seen tremendous innovation over the past 150, 200, crazy, mind-boggling innovation. And then to think that, blockchain and other emerging tech comes on and everyone's like, no, that's really not going to take hold. That's trendy. And certainly we had initial players, which, we can say bad actors or people who were greedy, who were entering the space, and investors who were willing to fund it because quick money. And certainly plenty of people made quick money off those investments. But at the same time, there are a lot who didn't. And then that gives the technology a bad name, which then makes it harder to find those right cybersecurity partners who are going to take a realistic, practical, thoughtful take at, like, again, what are we doing here? And like, this isn't going anywhere. How do we help you? And what does that look like? And okay, who do we need to bring to the table so that we can solve this problem for you and ensure that you're acting responsibly? So Tammy, you mentioned, in the conversation, what's an acceptable threat? I think that's an excellent question. I'm not always sure that the insurance companies are going to be aligned, but I think that's important. I think that's really important to ask a client, what does that look like? And then, are you asking insurance to still take care of that if you're considering it an acceptable threat? But I
think that's actually a very interesting partnership that probably needs to be explored a little more. Just thinking off the cuff as we're talking, but mapping acceptable threats to what's insurable, I think would be really cool, because there is no like risk that I know of, at least, like, risk score that maps to some of these unique threats, right? And so if there was some sort of a kind of a cookie cutter, but that does require time. Enough of these threat models have to be done. But I do think that we could get to a point where there is kind of agreeable metrics on what threats are. And I think, if I had to come up with a few, I think obviously it would be around kind of, is what you built secure, obviously, right? And, what does that look like? Drives me crazy as an auditor where people said, oh, we had an audit done. And I'm like, when? And they're like, 6 months ago. I'm like, and how much code have you changed since then? A lot. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter anymore. It's not dynamic. It's not a dynamic audit. So that's something at FIO we've been pushing, and it's not always to our financial benefit, because you can get these really big ones that are one-offs, but asking people to just incrementally do it. It's slower, but much better, because then I don't mind putting my name on something because I know that they're going to come back every time they push new code. But I think other metrics can be how many breaches has company email addresses have, how many phone numbers have been leaked, what are the chances of something being, an inside threat, not because somebody's trying to take down a company, but because they've just been, they haven't had great hygiene with their security, and all of us do not have great hygiene. I mean, I am the number one user of CryptPass because we built it, and when we started, I was in the database 17 times, and for silly things, Park Mobile, big breach, Drizzly, the drink order. Now they were bought, I think, by Uber Eats, but Evite, all the moms got killed with Evite. I mean, and you know how many people use their work emails for that sort of stuff? Because, you're one person. And so I do think there could be a mapping that could work to kind of standardize some of this stuff down the road.
Yeah. And I mean, I could just say too, and again, going back to the insurance model of it all, being that insurance, in order for insurers to get comfortable with anything, right? Anything brand new, it's going to always take a step back because we don't have the data. We don't really understand it yet. We haven't seen the claims. We don't know what that litigation is going to look like. And it's hard to model around something where you don't have data, right? How do I price this? How do I insure this? So from a client perspective, and what I tell to all my clients in the emerging technology is, don't tell me how great and innovative and ahead of it is. Tell me how this looks like everything else, because it's fundamental and it's core foundation. It does, right? Like Tammy, you're talking about business email compromise and data. That's what insurers know. That's the kind of conversation that we have all the time, right? So how do we break it down to understand, at the end of the day, this is something that insurers have been insuring. You're just calling it something a little bit different. And in fact, we can showcase that it may be more secure than what you're already insuring. So this is a no-brainer. So that's kind of my advice when we're talking about what's a good threat, right? How do you fundamentally build those analogies to showcase, listen, at the end of the day, yes, we are emerging and it's an emerging technology, but that is because we're just trying to do something in a more efficient manner. And it's not because we're doing something that is completely different than has ever been done before.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's really it. That's how I think it makes sense to approach a lot of the emerging tech, even the insurance policies, oh, we need something totally special. Not really. I mean, the concept of how we're approaching the insurance isn't that crazy. We can just tweak kind of existing things that we've already created. And I think now that we know that cybersecurity is a threat, that has evolved based off our technology. We really do have mechanisms to address it. And so I do see it as, again, the partnership and sharing of data, because that's really what the partnership does, is it paints that full picture for underwriters, or again, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be insurance. If it's certain partners, even if you're going to talk to a law firm about, hey, we need support, this is the kind of support we're looking for, this is what our business does, engaging them, you have to paint that full picture. And that's where I think it is difficult. And to your point, Courtney, when Clients are just so excited about the technology they've developed, and it's the best thing. And you get the investor deck, and you're trying to think about how you can, again, not charge them a lot of money for this because it's so new, and like really break it down and say, okay, ultimately you're just doing ABC. Okay, we've got that. We can translate ABC. We know how to do that. It may deflate their excitement on a call, but it definitely pays in dividends when you're able to deliver really a practical and reasonable solution to support them.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think on the data side as well, and I saw a question come in, and I know Anoop is actually has helped me we founded this Web3 security coalition. So this is like a question we've been grappling with for a long time. So he asked a question, and I mean, I talk more about the actionable risks inside of a company or inside of an organization, but there are these kind of wider systemic risks depending, especially in Web3, depending on where you deploy. So if you're going on some chain that has just lots and lots of smart contract vulnerabilities, there is aggregate data out there that can also be fed into this risk score. And I think that probably it's going to be a combination of both kind of companies looking directly internally at what they're building and what they're putting out there, but also externally, ecosystem wide, because I could see a set of circumstances where people who are deploying on Ethereum, are at one risk level versus deploying on chain X that has been shown that most of the smart contracts that have been deployed on there have vulnerabilities. And this could start to be a metric that I also think could be pulled in, and there are smart people like Anoop who are working on things like that. So I think it's good to look at it from both sides of that.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that Courtney and I have talked about before are legal expenses, and I think in general, companies go in, start their business. There's not a line item for getting sued. That doesn't exist. You can't really budget for that, right? And so I think that's why it's so important to have the partners to mitigate your risk, to ensure you're as secure as you can be, while also making sure that should you be sued, you've got some support on those legal costs. And that can be honestly for any kind of business. It doesn't have to be cybersecurity. It could be anything you're doing. The US especially, we're so litigious, anyone can sue. And you're not budgeting for it. And I think just helping clients understand what are we seeing? What kind of claims? And so that is the hard part when we're looking, for example, insurance. Okay, we don't know how to budget for this. We're going to pay a premium for insurance. What does that look like? It's really hard as when we, like 3-5 years ago or more, to come in and give a reasonable number because we didn't have the suits yet. We didn't know what those claims look like. We didn't know, we had no idea. And so to address that, I think that we're in a much better position now because again, we've seen fewer bad actors enter the space and we have more data based off the activity, suits being brought, but also the activity and how companies are handling the breaches. What does that look like? And they're learning from each other. And I find that in the tech space, there's far more cooperation than I really think about in other industries, which to me is an absolute bonus. This is great. Like we should partner and share information to improve everyone's business. It's a win-win. Nobody needs to lose in this game. And I think that's really the key. I think that's my recurring theme, and it sounds a little kumbaya, the partnership, but it really is important. And when you think of blockchain, I think that really makes sense that it really takes all of us to make this work efficiently. And so I'm excited to see how we are able to share more and more data across industries, across segments, businesses to really, again, understand what we're doing as this emerging tech. Tammy, as you say, people are changing code every day. So what does that look like? And how do we keep up with that and make sure that we, from Courtney's perspective, have the right insurance in place? And from your perspective, is the audit still valid? Your client has a breach tomorrow and they say, well, Tammy, you did this audit for me 6 months ago. I don't understand. I
Oh,
thought
we deal with that. And Justin asked the question, like, is there SOC 2 notice compliance for Web3? Not really, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say here. It's like, if we could agree on, kind of the threat architecture and what are acceptable threats, but or more importantly, what are unacceptable threats, like, and make sure that those are dealt with, and then the hygiene around dynamic protection, having your every push of your code audited, being able to show that, having a reputable, and this is not just a play for me, there's no way we could handle every client in the world. Like, there would have to be a coalition of companies that insurance providers say, okay, these 5, and this is how it would look. And I think that's sort of the way that it's gonna have to work to start to bring something that resembles kind of a SOC 2 for blockchain, because it is different. And in our little pre-chat, I said, the one thing about immutable, it's great, except when it's immutably wrong, or immutably hacked. And so, I personally think that the biggest emphasis from a risk perspective needs to be on proactively mitigating for those risks at both the code level, the human level, the ecosystem level. I think email breaches are growing. They're like the top way that companies are being taken down right now, is just through good old here we are in Web3, and yet email breaches are the top way of I have it here. 50, it's the fastest growing attack vector, 55% compound annual rate between 2020 and 2023, is just business email compromise. So,
and I can second that, right? And tell you, we just had stats come up from internally at NFP. We are, from our clients, we have seen 3x the times claims in September than we did over last year. And the vast majority of those are business email compromise, a lot of social engineering claims. We are seeing that more and more. The sophistication level of those are just, they're very, very good. I have clients where I have seen, they do all of the right steps. They may hire a third party to do the callback verification for them and everything, and they still get duped. So it's getting
well,
pretty interesting.
At Black Hat a couple of years ago, and we had to call our friends at Google before we did this, but 2FA can be hacked easily, especially the SMS version of it.
Like,
and we got up on stage, and Thomas, my co-founder, actually live on stage grabbed 2FA. It looked like it was coming from Google. It looked like it was the code, and then did the man in the middle attack and got into somebody's Binance account. Actually, at my other co-founder's Binance account, which was staged, but live on stage, just hacked him. And he did the same thing at the Solana conference a year later, because smishing, that's what they call it now, smishing. Or vishing, which is now with AI voice, they can phish you. Lots of ways to phish you, but there are so many ways to hang yourself right now. It can be very scary and sad, but I think there's also an increasing amount of ways to start to protect yourself. And I think that once people start applying like the real world stuff to their businesses and even just to their lives, like I joke with some people, I'm like, I feel like the way people are dealing with their security, even just personally, because businesses are made up of people, is they have an alarm system, they have one of those Nest cameras, they have, all the things that could keep their house safe. And yet they go out and open the door, keep it wide open, and walk out, and then put, their iPhone sitting there saying, please steal me. Like that's how it kind of feels. And I think a lot of companies think, well, if we have our employees watch those 27 videos about, Karen's, password being stolen, they'll be fine. And I think we gotta move from kind of move into more practical steps of people actually. I was on a podcast not too long ago, and I started to get angry, and I said, get off your asses and do something. Like, people have to just, like, you can't just talk about it. You actually have to, like, be more secure. I mean, I built a decentralized password manager. It's pretty easy to use, but it's still You still have to download a recovery kit. You have to put that in your safe, like just like you would do with any other security. And I think we all kind of have to realize that we all play a part of it.
Well, I think that's exactly right. It hits on the idea of the responsibility that goes along with using the technology. So if you're going to adopt the technology, you need to adopt the best practices that go along with the technology and understanding what that looks like. When you're talking about leaving the door wide open, but you've got your alarm and all these other things, it doesn't really make sense. So you're adopting a technology, but saying, but I'm just going to use the technology. I'm not going to do all these other things to make sure it's safe and secure. You're spot on. And to me, this is why I call this demystifying cybersecurity, because what we're talking about isn't necessarily unique to emerging tech. This is really, everyone needs to know the basics and address the basics. If you're using the technology, you need to make sure that you're using it responsibly and protecting your customers and investors. And
actually, one thing that, because I'm following the chat, and I did shamelessly ask for beta testers, so please, people, beta test. But 2FA is dead, and then people have said that because of what I just said, right? Except the companies like our banks have not abandoned it yet. And so they're keeping it alive. Like, I can't not use it for certain things. Like, I can't, not all of them even allow the authenticator, or then they have their own authenticator that isn't the one that I have. And now it's like 27 steps so I can do this. There's no standardization around that either. And so some of these technologies that we wish were dead right now, it does kind of require companies themselves to allow their consumers to be more secure as well. So it kind of goes, it's the people, it's the people, how they access other things. And then it's the companies themselves and what do they put out there? And does that meet some standardization of security that we can all live with? And right now we all know it's very disjointed. We log in 27 different ways. And then of course, let's use my Google sign in. Okay, I'll use my Google sign in. My Google has been breach. So now somebody can get into absolutely everything I have, or okay, no problem. I'll use the iCloud passkeys. They sound great, except now I'm storing them in the cloud, and I can only, if you want to use the Apple iCloud passkeys, you better be comfortable with it being stored in the cloud. Now somebody takes over your account, and we had somebody who has been close to us for a long time call us up about 6 months ago saying they got everything, and I said, is your password still blah, 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 blah? Because we had it in the breach database. And she said, yes. And I said, well, hey, that was it. And then everything from there, they got into the iCloud, which got into the Google, which got into the drives, which got it.
Yep. And what you're talking about exactly is how companies see breaches as well. It's that basic human behavior.
Yep. And I think too, right? I was at a conference not too long ago, and the keynote speaker, I thought, made a really good point, right? I think a lot of times when we talk about cybersecurity hygiene, we look at people as like kind of the biggest threat, which there is a lot of human element to it, right? But her point was, at some point we can't just blame the people, right? There's got to be an onus on the companies and kind of the cybersecurity practices and kind of the stuff that we implement to make people empowered, right? To not make those clicks and what's behind it and things of that nature as well. And I thought it was a good point to kind of bring up here.
And to think about it holistically, right?
Exactly.
I don't know. I kind of want to do it. I want to bring up Batman, but I don't know if we have time to bring up Batman.
Bring up like 4 minutes.
Bring up Batman, because
hang on a second.
Craig's bringing up Batman.
We're going to bring up Batman. No, the reason I bring up Batman is, this is demystifying cybersecurity, but one thing that we like to do with organizations that come to us is explain to them what a threat model really is. And so what you're seeing here is Bruce Wayne and Batman's threat model. And this is like, okay, here's the different threats of how, you can actually get to Bruce Wayne. You get in through, a leak through something in the paper. Is it the Joker? Could the police? And if we had spent the time really threat modeling, we would eventually figure out that there is a lot of threats, but the Joker getting to the security system and then getting a hold of Alfred, Bruce Wayne's butler, would probably be the highest threat in terms of finding and killing Batman. And I use this in jest just because it's funny and it's Batman, but I think a lot of organizations don't totally look at it this way and say, okay, if our objective is to protect Bruce Wayne, okay, that's like our number one objective. What are all the different ways that could fail? What are all the different ways? And again, when you apply this to Web3 and you're applying that, like somebody compromises those keys and Alfred gives away Bruce Wayne's keys and now all of his Bitcoin is lost, like the stakes get pretty high pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. And if I can even add on to that, right, just in insurance as a whole, one of our biggest issues right now is that idea of systemic, or kind of like that supply chain threat, right? In that, from an underwriter, I can underwrite to the cybersecurity hygiene of Bruce Wayne, but have I underwritten to the cybersecurity hygiene of Alfred, or whoever Alfred uses to get Bruce Wayne's favorite whiskey, or whoever else is coming through that door, right, on a day-to-day basis? And 9 times out of 10, when we see these breakdowns in network security, it's not our clients themselves, it is the vendors that they depend upon. And so that has become a huge issue for us. And, you know, that's one thing that we continue to empower our clients. You know, yes, you're telling me everything you're doing for yourself. Have you asked your vendors that same question?
Yeah.
And it could be a mixed bag of answers.
And I think that speaks to how it's just not ticking a box. Like, well, I have a contract with my vendor and the contract says they're going to do A, B, C, D, or, oh, they're going to have, an insurance policy, the cyber insurance policy. So we're all set. But you're not all set because you didn't really review exactly what they're doing and what their cyber hygiene looks like. And here we are with the breach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in, the day of high litigation right now, you brought that point up earlier, Karen, I want to re-emphasize it. When I started in cyber insurance, everybody was really, really just focused on what that first party loss coverage on their cyber policy was doing. That's all we really cared about. That's where everything stemmed from. Now I am seeing that third party. So that is, lawsuits being brought in due to a covered cyber event. It is being triggered over and over and over again. And that is either by consumers class action, which I have seen be very, very small. It does not have to be a big group of people. And a lot of times, because the plaintiffs bars are going after, where states have to showcase the notification list, they're reaching out to those people proactively and saying, hey, I see you may have been affected. You want to join this class action? And so we see people before they can even showcase any financial loss or any concern, bringing litigation already to the table. And then from a regulator perspective, right, I think the US in general has generally, when we think about regulation, has been keeping government out. Europe has been more of keeping corporations and what corporations can do with your data. We are completely shifting that, right? We're seeing new regulation come down the pipe. And not only that, we have seen some really creative plaintiffs attorneys take old regulation and flip it to bring some really creative lawsuits that can trigger the cyber policy. So I just want to make sure that point is not lost in the importance of cybersecurity and hygiene and insurance.
Yeah. And Tammy, I think you had something you wanted to chime in on.
It's always just, we just live in such a litigative world. I'm just sad about it. But I do think that's, I think that somehow a standardization of kind of a combination of kind of a threat modeling report with continuous auditing of not just code, but practices is probably something that's going to have to just get better, so that we can all kind of just point at it and be like, oh, do you have, because I mean, when we do a threat model, we give this 30-page document to the company, and that's what they're supposed to like oh, this happened. Okay, let's go back to how we looked at this. Ooh, okay, so the security system for Batman, we were relying on that not failing, and that failed. Let's update this because clearly, like, that has to be broken down even further. And I think it's a lot. It's just a lot of it's a lot of iteration. I think and the bad guys just keep going, so they're not going to stop. So as organizations and as people, we have to kind of stay ahead of it if we want to play online, right?
Right. Justin asked specifically about third-party vendor access via authentication requests, and I think that was more for what you were talking about, Courtney, and what it looks like when we're not talking about what's happening with our customers, but how our customers are being brought into suits. If you could touch on that.
I guess, and let me make sure I understand kind of the question a little bit more. So are you kind of asking me if I can reiterate it back? And maybe I should look at the question itself. But if I can repeat the question, kind of how are we asking or advising our clients from a cyber hygiene perspective to kind of deal with third-party vendors?
Yeah, Justin, that's how I'm reading it.
I think the concern is a little more that because of the nature of how the blockchain works, it's not like super GDPR friendly in terms of a lot of how you do it. And so, and Justin is right that, with ZK, zero knowledge stuff, that's like you don't have to know anything on either side. Like some of that stuff could probably play a little bit better. But yeah, at least that's my read on it.
Yeah, and I guess I probably don't have, the best answer for that, kind of based on kind of where you're going from it, Tammy, and things of that nature. But I think at the end of the day, right, I mean, I think it's really just, putting on the questions that, we're asking of our clients, right, from just a cybersecurity hygiene perspective, right, is kind of really just re-articulating that to those outside parties. And that can go just as deep as, how are you holding data? How is your system set up? What are your services looking like in those customers? Just that basic kind of things, having that understanding, and then looking at those contracts. I think that is kind of where we ultimately advise.
Yeah, I think resting on the contracts doesn't work anymore. It really is a matter of understanding what's in the contracts, but then again, knowing what that looks like. You can have a contract on a house, but what's it look like? And you don't see that in the contract, and you don't know what again, you don't know exactly what it looks like. You really need the full picture. And so unless you're really stipulating, you can have some requirements, but getting a full picture of cyber hygiene for your customers, I think is a hard ask. And so I think that's where there is really an opportunity for providers to really support clients and give guidance and figure out how do we really educate our clients and what they're asking of their vendors. What does that look like? I mean, we often, again, give little checklists to our clients and say, okay, you need to ask for A, B, C, D. But again, what does that really look like? And how do we know who we're really, I was going to say getting in bed with, but how do we know, who we're really signing this deal with? How do we know them? How do we know what their approach is to risk at the end of the day? And that should be really important to us if we're relying upon them for our business.
Agreed.
Wonderful. I know Justin has just shared a few more things.
And it's where I thought, so yes. And yeah, so, yes, we know 2FA is easily compromised. Yes, there needs to be, more thoughts around the uses of blockchain technology. I mean, like I said, plug for what we're trying to build. I mean, we have a decentralized password manager for consumers. I mean, businesses can use it if they want, but the idea there is we are actually using the decentralized and also peer-to-peer. So there's going to be more emerging technologies that build on top of this that could actually support it. Because I think, to Justin's point, the existing stuff's a little stale. And we're all kind of forced to work with them, which means we're forced to have to insure around that sort of risk. And yet it's a risk that we prefer not to take. And it's a little bit of a catch-22. So I'm all for using the technology to discover new ways to deal with the problems, right? That's a cool way to do it.
Wonderful. So as we're coming up on time, I really want to tell you how much I appreciate you both, because this was wonderful. I really intended this to be a short session, but I'm absolutely delighted. It has gone on as long as it has, almost an hour, and really appreciate the comments that we've had in the chat. At the BBA, we hope to give you these small bites, and if you can only join for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever it is, we hope you've gotten a lot out of it. And we'll continue to bring more of these small bites events, and would also love to have people participate in person. And we would love to have a cybersecurity event in person in Boston. There's so much to be had here, and I think it's very easy. There's so many people innovating in the space. We certainly know a lot of folks in the community, and again, really appreciate Courtney and Tammy joining tonight, and would love to take this conversation in person in the coming months. And Courtney and Tammy, if you have any closing remarks, appreciate that.
Thank you for including me in this conversation. I don't get to do a lot of this, so really appreciate the chance just to have a informal chat. And I'd be totally game for in person. I never get to do anything in person, so that'd be fun.
All right.
Yeah, I can always second that. Thank you for having me. I can talk insurance all day. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions later, just about preparing yourself and really even kind of having that conversation, right? Don't let your broker or your insurer just say, I don't understand it, so I don't know what to do, right? There are ways to communicate and get that coverage, which is very important.
Yep. And I think just knowing that through the BBA, certainly through Courtney and Tammy and other resources we are here and committed to supporting the blockchain and emerging tech space. So there are certainly resources. If you have questions, we're all here to get through this together and help one another. So we're happy to do that. Please feel free to be in touch with me, Courtney, Tammy, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.